Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel wherever you are in the world, and I'm so delighted you've joined me. We've got another part of our story tonight, which is part 3, and I don't know about you, but I'm excited to learn more about this mystery man, Philip Loveday. One can be rarely charmed by a beautiful name, but it doesn't mean that the person actually lives up to it. And what on earth is Mrs. Thomas going to do about Philip Loveday? How's she going to find out more about him? We're about to find out. And let's continue with part 3 of our story. Suffice to say, from their first meeting onwards, Emily was extravagantly showered by Philip Loveday with a fragrant, colourful confetti of expensive gifts that I suspect worked a fair way in softening down the hard edges of Emily's doggedly determined resolve not to ever date again or get seriously involved with anyone. I could see that the man soon had her eating out of the palm of his hand, for he completely won Emily over, and she'd come to work with a skip in her step and a bright sparkle in her eyes, which left me in no uncertain doubt that Emily had fallen head over heels in love with Philip Loveday. I hasten to say in the very beginning I was so chuffed for her, to see her so happy, as were the Bollinger brothers, until things went badly awry for me, when I first met Philip Loveday, in person that is. I had conjured him up so very differently in my mind's eye, before I actually met him, but when I did my heart dipped. There is no other way to put this kindly. I knew instinctively, with a gut-punching sense of foreboding, that something was terribly amiss. For a start, Philip Loveday failed to maintain any eye contact with me when I asked him any pertinent questions about his life and himself. Ostensibly he masterfully brushed my inquiries away, like the dandruff on a shirt collar, and changed the subject with startling efficiency. I found him to be evasive and bashfully sheepish, as if he was guiltily hiding something, a secret that he was not willing to share. I began to worry about Emily's relationship with this man, especially when Philip Loveday and Emily started to live together. Philip Loveday bought a property for the both of them in an upmarket prestigious green leafy neighbourhood, where the houses most certainly do not come cheap. What was questioned to be rather perturbing for me, and paradoxical, was that Mr. Loveday was away for 4 days of the week on business, and Emily only vaguely knew about where he worked. It would seem Emily had never met Mr. Loveday's family, as he had no family to speak of, which I thought was awfully convenient, due to having apparently been an orphan, with both biological parents sadly deceased. Emily claimed he didn't have any close friends, as after being caught up in the isolating effects of a foster care system, being carelessly flung from one family to another, like a game of pass the parcel, as a consequence he had never managed to procure any long-lasting friendships with people. Philip Loveday certainly did not strike me as a kind of man that was incompetent at establishing relationships with people. Indeed, he epitomized charm. His witty, mesmerizing social skills were thoroughly engaging. He was sophisticated and savvy. Something didn't add up. If he really was incapable of making friends, why was he naturally gregarious and assertive by nature? The way he skillfully wooed Emily from the very start was done by a man who proficiently knew what he was doing, and how to charm the socks off her with a winsome charisma. Not some reticent recluse lacking the social skills and courage to actually ask her out, as you would ultimately expect, if his outspoken claims about himself were to be believed. I decided I needed to investigate Philip Loveday more closely before Emily married this man, which was likely to happen next, if I didn't put a stop to it. I became unduly alarmed when Emily came to work one day with a stash of wedding magazines in her hands, hinting to me excitedly that she and Philip had been talking about getting married. That almost certainly got my antennae wagging, let me tell you. I knew that Philip Loveday was furtively hiding something from Emily. I just knew it in my heart. I was compelled to find out what it was, as the curiosity was eating away at me like a worm in an apple. My husband Kevin thought I was jumping to all kinds of wild, unsubstantiated conclusions. "Why would Philip Loveday have anything to hide, love?" he'd say to me. He told me I was reading far too much into his relationship with Emily, and I should let it go. Honestly, love, Mr. Loveday sounds like a very nice man, if you ask me." He kept talking about this over and over again like a broken record. "You should be happy for Emily. Why are you so suspicious of their relationship? He may be older than her, but lots of younger women are enamoured by older men. Is it such a bad thing? It doesn't mean anything nefarious is actually going on. The only thing that's working overtime, love, is your highly suggestible imagination. I know, of course, you worry about the fact that he's away from home for 4 nights a week. But it doesn't mean that he has a duplicitous agenda, does it? Think about it for a moment. Lots of people are away from their partners during the week, in all manner of occupations that you can think of. It's not unusual, you know. It happens in the military, the navy, for pilots, lorry drivers, travelling salesmen, does it not?" "Maybe so," I agreed, "but I just need to find out what's going on here." My husband raised one of his bushy eyebrows, shrugged his shoulders and let out a weary sigh. "I can see, love, that you are not persuaded to change your mind about Philip Loveday. When you get that willful look in your eyes, I know that I might as well concede defeat, because you're going to do what you're going to do, no matter what the hell I say." "Yes, I am," I said obstinately. "If you must know, I'm thinking of hiring a private detective to follow Philip Loveday around, find out what he gets up to in this carpet business in Nevada of his, where he claims to be supplying prestigious carpets to hotels on the Strip, like the Bellagio and places like that, fancy casinos, that sort of thing." My husband looked at me with round eyes that looked like they might actually pop off his face like a teddy bear's glass eyes. "Love, is that not over the top? Hiring a private detective, I mean, to investigate Philip Loveday. He's not exactly an escaped felon, is he? I suspect he's a normal, very respectable American citizen, like you and me." "It depends on what you call normal," I said gingerly. "Well, sweetheart, do what you want to do. I know I cannot stop you. You're bloody-minded and contrary at the very best of times. But if it puts your mind at rest that Philip Loveday is a respectable citizen that genuinely loves Emily and means to treat her well, then so be it. Otherwise, I'm likely never to hear the end of it." My husband knew I was like a dog with a bone when I got my teeth into something. I appreciated his support, of course I did, even though he was not entirely on board with my idea of hiring a detective to follow Philip Loveday around on the days of the week when he claimed to be in Nevada. Regretfully, when I inquired on the costs of hiring a private detective to do the job for me and to investigate the man more thoroughly, I was absolutely astounded at the excessive costs and, of course, the expenses that I would likely incur. As a consequence, I promptly decided that I would investigate Philip Loveday myself. I was shocked by the audacity of what these private investigators actually charged. I certainly didn't have that kind of free-flowing cash to burn. So spending it myself would be a more sagacious choice, and at least I knew I would do the job properly. I've always believed in the saying, if you want something done well, then do it yourself. I had taken a few days off work at the dental surgery, and had cautiously begun to follow Philip Loveday around in my red Hyundai Santa Fe. I expected to be following him directly to the airport, where he'd get a flight to Nevada, where he was supposed to work for some carpet company, providing plush carpets for casinos and fancy hotels, and where he lived in a hotel room for 4 days a week. Well, that's what I'd been told by Emily anyway, that he never stayed at one fixed hotel at a time, which in itself was decidedly suspicious. I had decided that I would board a flight to Nevada myself, to clandestinely follow the man around the Strip, to see what he got up to half the week when he was away from Emily. Imagine my surprise when Philip Loveday never actually went to the airport, nor did he board a flight. Indeed, he didn't even leave Washington State. Instead, I followed him to a property an hour out of Seattle, in a heavily wooded area. Unfortunately, I couldn't follow his car down the long drive, as it would ultimately be drawing attention to myself, and so the only way I could get closer to look at the house he had driven up to was on foot, by navigating my way gingerly through the trees, something I had not expected to need to do. Thank goodness, in my trunk I'd come well prepared for every eventuality. Maybe I had the makings of a good private detective in me after all. I knew in my trunk I had a good pair of walking boots, some yoga pants that I could wear, that I could surreptitiously change into behind the trees. But the first thing I needed to do was to hide my car, in a discreet place where it wouldn't be easily seen from the road. Finally I'd thrown on some clothes and sensible walking boots, as I surreptitiously dressed behind a bush very quickly, throwing my other redundant clothes back into the trunk of my car. I put on some lightweight binoculars over my neck and proceeded to walk through the large congregation of trees towards the property. I knew now with absolute certainty that Philip Loveday was lying to Emily about something. I would be damned if he was going to hurt my good friend. I couldn't allow that to happen under any circumstances. Emily had been broken-hearted enough from her first relationship with Freddie Murray. I was not going to let Philip Loveday cause her even more anguish. The woodgrove stretched out before me like a sizable yawn, boasting an eclectic, rather mixed assembly of tall, lofty trees. Some of them were pines. I sombrely walked through the trees. I don't mind admitting there was a nervous little flutter coming from a low-frequency sound in my heartbeat that was becoming more prominent as it drummed conspicuously against the wall of my chest. I suspect I knew I was on to something. I felt like the rice in a kid's rattle, all shook up, you could say. My walking boots grazed the billowing swells, dips and jagged crevices on the richly fertile soil. I cautiously navigated my way over rocks and burgeoning roots that twisted through the grounds like the gnarled veins in an old man's legs. I got the overwhelming sense that something or someone was following me. But who? I stood cautiously still, surveying my environment sedulously, scanning the trees for any signs of movement. But all was still. I could hear the pretty trills of the bird-song in the canopy above my head. I saw a couple of squirrels playing acrobatics in the trees, but beyond that I saw very little. I told myself that my unsettling feeling of being followed was naturally the product of a fertile imagination on my part. I was fortunate, as there were open trails through the trees that, although narrow, were easy to weave through, although occasionally the nagging sculptural boughs of a tree would brush obtrusively against my clothes, like a cold, unyielding, bony hand, determined to know what I was doing there. Well, it felt like that anyway. I was painfully, conspicuously aware that I was trespassing on private property, which made me apprehensive and on edge. The footpaths were covered in a pretty confetti of fallen leaves, pine needles and twigs. So ultimately, when I walked down the paths, I would make quite a noisy commotion. Twigs would pop under my weight, as my boots pressed the woodland foliage beneath my rubber soles, like a pestle and mortar. I was struck with the feeling that if I didn't happen to be investigating Mr. Loveday like this, I would likely be thoroughly enjoying this walk in the woods, which was spectacularly beautiful, I have to say. I could almost be on a camping holiday, going off on an exploratory walk, enjoying the pretty prisms of sunlight dancing through the canopy, showering the grove in a subterranean quality that made it feel like entering a world within a world. That is the only way I can describe it to you. Everything was prepossessingly beautiful, and ubiquitous ferns grew abundantly all over the grove at will, along with pretty flowering shrubs. The woody turpine-like smells you get from walking among pine needles was very pleasing to smell. I was suddenly struck by the bodeful, discomposing feeling that I was not alone, that something or someone was watching me, following me, and probably even cautiously stalking me. And the inauspicious, foreboding feeling gnawed at me, sending prickles of dread tingling down my spine. I stopped dead in my tracks and turned around to examine the woodgrove attentively. I was sure I'd heard a distinctive rustle, and some tree branch had just snapped and fallen to the ground with a crashing thump. I decided it had to be something that had done that, because branches just did not snap off so easily on their own accord like that. Someone had made it happen. But who? Something was there. Something was behind me. And whatever it was big in stature and size. even though I could not physically see it. My glasses were a little fogged up, so I hurriedly took them off to rub them against my shirt, replacing them back on my face. I began to rigorously scrutinize the grove, probing it with a microscopic intensity, carefully looking even more attentively for any sign of movement, but nothing was there. All of a sudden, like a flash of lightning, a voice boomed inside my head. It was not my own. It said with a jovial amusement, "You can look as much as you like, but you won't find me. No one ever finds me." What the hell, I thought. Was I losing leave of my senses? Something had just spoken to me in my head. It was a distinctive male voice that was not my own. "Who are you?" I called out into my head. "You want to know who I am?" came the voice. "You'll have to find me first, and good luck with that." I felt as if the voice was toying with me, teasing me playfully, almost as if the owner wanted to play hide-and-seek with me. It wasn't threatening in any way, but kittenish and rather mischievous. I was overcome with an insatiable curiosity and inquisitiveness, wondering who the voice actually belonged to. But my thoughts drifted away when all of a sudden I was distracted by two little children, running right into the grove, screaming excitedly. "You'll never catch me, Duncan! I'm much faster than you! You may be a boy, but I can outrun you any time!" "No, you can't!" "Well, catch me then, if you can," said the girl, dashing into the woods. I observed it was one boy and one girl, both between the ages of 9 and 10. On seeing me, the young boy stopped, pursuing his sister at once to look at me through his inquiring, inquisitive blue eyes, and then his sister joined his side. "Why aren't you chasing me, Duncan?" she cried out. "Have you already admitted you can never ever catch me? Are you really such a wuss?" It was then that the young girl noticed me too, and promptly joined her brother's side, and both pairs of eyes were fixed on me, with a quizzical curiosity. "Who are you?" the young boy asked me. "What are you doing on our property? You do know that this is a private property. Daddy says no one is allowed here except our family, 'cause he bought the house and the land, you see." "Oh, I'm dreadfully sorry. I know I'm naughty being here. You're quite right, I shouldn't be on your property because it is private. But I was looking for my pussycat, if you must know." "You've lost your cat?" asked the boy. "That is too bad. You must be really, really sad. We had a cat once," he said, pulling a face. "But he got very old and died. My mummy said she'd get us another one, but she still hasn't taken us to the shelter to choose one yet." "Well, I'm very sorry to hear that, and I'm sorry that your cat died," I said empathetically. "I'm afraid I've lost mine. Silly me. I'd lose my head if I wasn't careful." The young boy furrowed his brow. "But how do you know that your cat is in our woods?" "Because the window of my truck was open. I didn't realize it, of course. I was driving along the road, and I think my cat cunningly got out of the cat basket and went flying through the window. I was taking him to the vet, you see, for his vaccination. The next thing I knew, he went flying through the trees. I parked my car and went running behind him. But he could be anywhere in here by now. I'm trying to find him." "Maybe he was scared about having a vaccination," said the little girl, her blue eyes growing intensively wide. "I hate getting vaccinations, and I hate all needles. I always cry when they put an injection in me. Your poor cat must be very scared. No wonder he ran away." "That must be it. Of course you're right," I said. "Why didn't I ever think of that? I suspect he's hiding from me because he knows he's going to the vet, and he can't stand it when the vet gets a needle into him." The young girl grimaced sympathetically. "That's exactly why he ran away," she told me. "We'll help you find him. What's his name?" asked the young boy earnestly. I had to think quickly on my feet. I couldn't believe how seamlessly my lie was. The children were buying my story. I told them the first name that came into my head. "His name is Cheese." "That's a funny name for a cat," said the girl, laughing. But I kind of like it, 'cause I really like cheese, especially the cheese and pretzels. Before long, the children were helping me call out for cheese. I could swear someone else was calling out the name cheese as well. The same voice that had spoken to me in my head, but this time it was speaking the name out loud. But the kids did not appear to notice it, as they were so preoccupied and absorbed with looking up trees to call out my cat's name. "He's probably up in one of those trees," I told the young boy. "I bet he's laughing at us 'cause we can't find him." They were such lovely, delightful kids. I wondered if they'd come to our dental surgery for a check-up. The girl in particular, with her conspicuously individualistic strawberry blonde hair and a scattering of freckles on her nose, seemed very familiar to me. The children were polite and well-spoken. They were eager to help me find my fictitious cat, which made me warm to them at once. All of a sudden I heard a female voice calling out, "Liesel! Duncan! Where are you?" "We better go," said the girl, looking around nervously. "That's our mum calling us. She gets very cross if we don't listen to her. We're not supposed to be playing in the grove. She doesn't like it when we come here when we don't ask her permission first." "Well, don't tell her I'm here, will you?" I asked them. "I don't want to get in trouble with your mother, because I know I'm trespassing, but I just need to find cheese." "We won't tell her, don't worry," said the girl, as if she liked the idea of keeping a secret. "Do you think you will find cheese?" she asked me, looking concerned. "Maybe you should tell her that you won't take her for an injection, and then she'll come out from her hiding place. My mummy says that too many vaccinations are very, very bad for your health." "Why does she say that?" I asked. "'Cause it messes with your natural immunity." "Liesel! Duncan! Where are you?" came the voice. "Get back here at once! I can't wait for you here all day. I know you're skulking around in the woods, and if you don't come out at once, I'll get you myself." "We better go," said the boy apologetically. "We didn't ask permission to play here, you see. So she's going to be very cross with us, our mummy. So I do hope you find cheese. I wish we could help you look for her. But my mum, she gets really upset if we don't listen to her." I watched the children running through the trees towards a woman who was standing in a sprawling yard, wearing a long pair of white shorts. She had her hands on her hips and looked decidedly annoyed. I knew at once that, like the children, I recognized the woman. The lady came to our dental surgery for checkups every 6 months. Furthermore, Emily had given the lady and her children a dental cleaning. I tried to remember the woman's name, but it flew out of my mind like a bird on the wind. She was an attractive lady with strawberry blonde hair, like her daughter Liesel's, fair skin and blue eyes, and a similar splattering of freckles on her nose that I remember from close-up scrutiny when talking to her once. "How many times have I told the both of you not to go playing in the woods?" she snapped at her children, "when neither of you have taken it upon yourselves to do your chores yet." "Oh, don't be too hard on them, Hilda," said a man coming out of the house that I recognized at once. It was Mr. Marianto. Mr. Marianto was one of our most beloved long-time patients, who had been at the surgery for years and years, and was an extremely good friend of Dr. Warren Bollinger. I do know they occasionally played golf together on the weekends. I remembered his daughter Hilda, whom had been coming to the surgery for many years. Father and daughter were standing together side by side, as Hilda's face seemed to soften as her 2 children began to reel off their apologies to her, as if reading a script for a play they had rehearsed over and over again. "Sorry, Mummy," they both grovelled obsequiously. "We didn't mean to go into the grove, but we wanted to play, that's all. But we'll do our chores, we promise you." "It's not that I mind you going into the grove, but I do mind when you don't ask me permission first. And I don't like it when you fail to do your chores. Next time, you must do your chores before you have any games. Do you understand?" "Yes, Mummy." The family I was spying on through the trees I knew well enough. I'd never met Hilda's husband before, though. I did know that Mr. Marianto lived in a house in the woods with his grown-up daughter, her 2 children, and the elusive husband that I had never had the privy to meet yet. "I so wish I could get that husband of mine to come to the Bollinger dental surgery," Hilda had told me once. Let's not kid. Warren Bollinger is the quintessential best dental surgeon in the entire world as far as I'm concerned. But my husband simply refuses to change his dentist. He's obstinate that way, you know. He's been going to Laurie Pearson for years and years. Well, that makes sense, I had told her. People get very attached to their dentists, you know. Some of our married clients visit different dental surgeries as a result. It's a common occurrence. I do recall that Hilda Marianto was determined not to change her maiden name when she got married, as she was her father's only child. She didn't want the family name to be eclipsed, but carried through to subsequent generations. So even the children enjoyed the surname Marianto on Hilda's insistence. I said to my husband, she told me once, that if I was to keep his surname, and my children did the same, that would be the end of my family line. And I didn't want that to happen, as you can appreciate. My husband is fortunate enough to have brothers that can carry on his family name. But my family is not so lucky, as my parents only had me. My dad is incredibly pleased, as you can imagine, that I'm keeping his name. Luckily, my husband understands and appreciates all this. As I tried to fit the enigmatic pieces of the jigsaw puzzle together, I wondered if Hilda Marianto's husband was in fact Philip Loveday. Was the man living a double life, dating Emily and clandestinely married to Hilda Marianto at the same time? I had followed his red Grand Cherokee Wrangler to the property, although I'd never been brazen enough to tailgate it down the driveway. Philip Loveday's car was boldly squatting in the driveway under the carport, next to two other SUVs, one a white Ford Explorer, the other a black Ford Wrangler, which I happened to know belonged to Mr. Marianto. I was ruminating over all this, the questions flying around my head. I saw Philip Loveday all of a sudden, nonchalantly emerging through the front door of the house, looking both casual and extremely relaxed. The man sported a pair of white cotton chinos and a pale olive green golfing shirt, and on his feet he was wearing an unpretentious pair of loafers. I'd never seen him dressed so informally before, but I knew I was staring at Philip Loveday, and he looked as if he belonged on the property. He sashayed breezily towards Hilda Marianto, putting a loving arm around her, leaning over to kiss her on the cheeks. I don't mean to interfere, my love, but I don't think you should be so hard on the kids, said Philip obsequiously. I mean, if they want to play out in the woods for a while, why not let them? The fresh air is very good for their health, you know. The chores can wait, can they not? I'm back home for the next 3 days. Why don't you relax the rules a little while I'm around? Please, Mummy, please, can we go back and play in the woods? The kids begged her. Hilda Marianto frowned. Philip, she groaned, you aren't here half the time. You don't know what goes on. I'm tired of the kids not listening to me. They're always getting up to mischief. I'm sorry, but the answer is no, she said firmly. You kids have to learn to take responsibility. You know the rules in this house. It's chores and homework. That takes precedence over everything. Play comes later. You heard your mother, Duncan, came Philip's obdurate voice. What has she told you to do? I said I would clean the bathroom upstairs. Then do it. And once you've done it, I'm sure your mother will let you play out of doors as much as you like. Won't you, dear? Not until our Duncan has done his science project. He keeps stalling it, don't you, Duncan? You need to finish it. I will remind you the deadline is next Tuesday. You've got a lot to do. Once you've worked on it for at least half an hour, then you can go and play with your sister to your heart's content, after you've done your chores, of course. And you, Liesel, what do you need to do in the way of chores? Philip asked the young girl. I told Mummy that I'd sort out the laundry for her and wipe down all the kitchen surfaces. Good girl. Then do it then, will you? What are you waiting for? Get inside, the both of you. Don't procrastinate. Once you've done everything, you can celebrate, and I'll take you both out for ice creams. How about that? Ice creams! Ice creams! Cried the kids together in delight, running into the house eagerly to get their chores done. I watched the family going back indoors, apart from Mr. Marianto, Hilda's father, who ambled out of doors with a trowel in his hands and began to work on his large vegetable bed that he'd told me all about at the surgery, and about some of the vegetables he'd grown. One was an 80-pound cabbage, and another was a 96-pound pumpkin. I could see he grew all manner of vegetables in that space, and he claimed his successes were due to the fertility of the ground. But I could see as he busily attended to the vegetable beds that Mr. Marianto took great pride in his vegetables. I hid discreetly behind the trees, shaking like a leaf when I soaked in the astounding revelations that I'd uncovered in a manner of a few minutes. The 2 Marianto children were now back indoors, probably wishing that they could help me look for my fictitious cat called Cheese. I felt bad I'd made up the story, but I had no doubt these loyal little kids would not blow my cover. They were such lovely, well-behaved children. I hasten to say that Duncan Marianto bore an uncanny resemblance to Philip Loveday, because, of course, Philip was his father. I realized with an unquestionable certainty that Philip Loveday was married to Hilda Marianto. They had 2 children together called Duncan and Liesel. Hilda Marianto and her children went by her father's surname. The pieces were beginning to fit together beautifully. The family lived in this beguiling, attractive double-story house in the woods that resembled the most perfectly symmetrical colonial-style doll's house, reminding me a lot of the house that Mr. Loveday had purchased for Emily Riesling and her mother, in a Seattle green leafy neighbourhood. It would seem Philip Loveday cunningly spent half the week with his wife and kids, and the other half with Emily Riesling and her mother. Did he even work for this fictitious carpet company or not, that appeared to supply luxurious carpeting to casinos and upmarket hotels? Or was that just a convenient cover story? It would seem money was clearly not an issue in his life, but he was living a double life for sure, and Emily had no idea about any of this. Regretfully, it would appear that my hunch about Philip Loveday had paid off in leaps and bounds. How I wished I'd been wrong about the man, but I clearly was not. There was no doubt in my mind he was living a double life, and it was also clear that he adored his wife and kids. It was ironic to think his wife and children were actually patients at our surgery. It certainly was a small world in the grand scheme of things. I was finding it a struggle to digest everything I had just gleaned. My heart thundered wildly in my chest, and nausea swelled in the back of my throat. I felt anger and disgust that Philip Loveday had betrayed Emily's trust like this. I was sure that this unfortunate knowledge would destroy her. In her short life, Emily Riesling had been hit hard by the flying shrapnel of cheating boyfriends. She needed another cheating lowlife in her life like a hole in her head. I knew private investigators took photographs, so if a spouse was invariably cheating on a partner, the investigator promptly returned to his client with photographic evidence concerning their spouse's infidelity. I couldn't exactly go back to Emily Riesling at the surgery and say, "Your boyfriend, Philip Loveday, is leading a double life, and he's married with children," without substantial evidence to prove it. It hadn't occurred to me to bring along a camera for the ride, but I needed specialty equipment that could take close-up photographs from a distance, the kind of professional cameras that private investigators likely carry. Sadly, I'd overlooked and disregarded such a consequential, very important consideration. I'd have to think of a plan. Telling Emily Riesling this disconcerting news was going to go down like a ton of bricks with her. I'd need some hard, compelling evidence to back up my outrageously objectionable claims. Emily would likely say I was sorely mistaken, that I'd got things badly wrong, that there must be some mistake. There was no way that Philip Loveday would dare to cheat on her like this, even though she barely knew anything about his background at all. I could already predict Emily's defensive reasoning. I was in no doubt that Emily was an abject denial about the seemingly affable, self-possessed, worldly wise Philip Loveday. She wanted to believe more than anything in the world that she had met the polished, sophisticated gentleman that invariably she would one day marry. I remember when she told me he was the one for her. Something inside me wanted to squirm. Wow, that's incredible. We're on part 3 of our story and it's getting very, very exciting. I'm sure you agree. So I look forward to you joining me tomorrow night. Until next time, goodbye and good night.